Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday. There's something about everyone gathering around the table, catching up on each other's lives and sharing stories that always makes me feel warm inside. My family, for all their quirks, truly loves one another, but they've got this unfortunate habit of taking their jokes way too far. Most of the time, I laugh it off knowing they don't mean any harm. They've always been like this, teasing about little things, pushing boundaries, but they're family and I love them. This year, though, I had a weird feeling in my gut as I was getting ready. The usual excitement wasn't there, replaced by this uneasy sense I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just nerves, I told myself. Thanksgiving with family can always be a bit unpredictable, but we always manage to make it through with smiles by the end. Dinner started out fine, or at least it seemed that way. My sister Olivia was in one of her loud, joking moods. She's always been the life of the party, cracking jokes left and right. And tonight was no different. Dad carved the turkey, while Mom fussed over the sides, and we all settled into the familiar rhythm of our family dinners. The first few jokes about my marriage felt harmless. The kind of stuff I was used to brushing off. Someone teased me about how I'd landed a husband who can cook better than me. Since he had culinary experience, he always got roped into kitchen duty during family gatherings. I laughed along, letting it roll off my back, but as the evening went on, the jokes started cutting a little deeper. I was in the middle of reaching for the stuffing when Olivia smirked and made her big joke of the night. She said something about how her son Nathan had my husband's exact eyes. The room erupted in laughter before I even had a chance to react. It was the kind of laughter that builds and feeds off itself, loud and overwhelming. I froze, my hand hovering over the dish and my face heating up. Nathan does have big, expressive eyes, but to compare them to my husband's? I couldn't believe she said it out loud, much less that everyone found it funny. The laughter didn't die down quickly either. Mom added something about how it wasn't just the eyes. Maybe Nathan had picked up some of my husband's good looks too. That only made the laughter louder. I glanced over at my husband, who was standing in the kitchen doorway drying his hands with a dish towel. I didn't know if he had heard, but he looked uncomfortable. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit there and pretend like it was all okay. The laughter was still ringing in my ears as I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room went quiet. I mumbled something about needing fresh air and walked out despite their protests. My husband called out to me as I grabbed my coat from the entryway. I felt his eyes on me as I opened the door and stepped into the cold November air, but he didn't follow me. I got into my car and drove aimlessly for a while, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The scene kept replaying in my head, the way they'd all laughed, the way my sister had smirked, the way my husband just stood there like a bystander. I kept trying to convince myself it was nothing, just a bad joke taken too far. But why did it feel like something else entirely? When I finally made it home, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Olivia's voice, that stupid smirk in her tone, when she said those words. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was letting a bad moment ruin what was supposed to be a good night. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, the unease in my chest wouldn't go away. The next morning, I told my husband everything. I expected him to be furious on my behalf and to say Olivia had gone too far and I was right to leave. Instead, he shrugged it off. He said I shouldn't take it so seriously and that it was just Olivia being Olivia. He said they didn't mean any harm, that it was just their way of joking around. I stared at him, waiting for him to say more and waiting for him to defend me, but he didn't. Instead, he told me I was overreacting and I shouldn't let one stupid comment ruin my mood. And just like that, the sinking feeling in my stomach grew heavier. It wasn't just his words, it was his tone, the way he avoided meeting my eyes and the way he seemed more concerned with brushing it off than addressing how I felt. For the first time, I started questioning things I never wanted to question. Why didn't he say something when Olivia made that joke? He acted like he didn't hear it. But why did he look so nervous standing there in the kitchen? When I asked him why his dismissal felt less like reassurance and more like deflection, I told myself I was being ridiculous, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Am I overthinking this? Am I being stupid? I need your opinion. Update 1. The days following Thanksgiving were a haze of unease. I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest or the memory of my family's laughter cutting through me like a blade. What haunted me most wasn't even their insensitive joke, it was my husband's reaction. His dismissal of it, as their usual awful joking selves gnawed at me, leaving an unsettled itch in the back of my mind. I tried to push the feeling aside, convincing myself I was overthinking, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't let it go. The more I thought about his response, the more it felt off, like there was something he wasn't telling me. And then there was Olivia, my sister, with her smirk and that ridiculous joke. On its own, it was tasteless but harmless, but paired with the way my husband had just stood there, silent and awkward, it made my stomach twist. Over the next few days, I found myself revisiting old memories, and suddenly, things I'd dismissed as meaningless began to take on a different shape. There was the time Olivia had made a joke about how she and my husband got along better than he and I ever did. I'd laughed it off at the time, chalking it up to her usual over-the-top humor, but now the memory gnawed at me. And then there were the shared glances I'd caught between them over the years. Nothing outright inappropriate, at least not that I'd noticed, but moments that suddenly felt too familiar. Little things I had brushed aside in the past now surfaced in a new, unsettling light. There was that one Christmas when we'd all played charades and Olivia and my husband had been on the same team. They'd been nearly unbeatable, guessing each other's clues with a kind of ease that struck me as almost intimate. I'd felt left out then, but I'd laughed it off, telling myself it was all in good fun. Now that memory felt like a weight pressing on my chest. Desperate to quiet the storm in my mind, I started going through old photos and social media posts. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but I couldn't stop. I combed through pictures from family gatherings, trying to prove myself wrong, to find some reassurance that I was just being paranoid. But instead, I found things that only made my unease worse. There they were, standing too close together in photo after photo. Olivia's hand on his arm in one picture, the two of them laughing in the background of another. Her captions on some of the posts were innocent on the surface, but carried a strange undertone when I read them now. Always fun hanging out with my favorite brother-in-law, one of her posts said with a winking emoji. I kept scrolling, my chest tightening with each post I unearthed. The signs weren't blatant, but they were there, like faint cracks running through a seemingly solid foundation. It wasn't just the pictures either. I started remembering offhand comments Olivia had made, things that seemed flirtatious in hindsight. Like the time she joked that if I ever messed up, she'd be happy to take my place. Everyone laughed, including me. I thought it was harmless at the time, but now it felt anything but. The weight of it all was unbearable, and I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. One evening, I confronted my husband. I tried to keep my voice calm, but my frustration and anxiety bled through. And I asked him about the jokes, about the pictures, about whether he thought Olivia ever crossed a line. He sighed, his tone dismissive, and said I was letting my imagination run wild. He reminded me that Olivia was always joking around and that she didn't mean anything by it. When I pressed him, asking why he hadn't defended me at Thanksgiving or why he seemed so uncomfortable, he waved it off. He said he didn't want to cause a scene and thought it was better to let it blow over. So he had heard what they said, yet the next day he acted like he hadn't. His words sounded reasonable, but his tone didn't. There was something in the way he spoke that felt like he was avoiding something deeper. I asked him directly if he thought Olivia's behavior was inappropriate, and he hesitated before answering. That hesitation felt like a slap in the face. He finally said no, that I was overreacting and needed to let it go. But the way he said it, the way his voice tightened and his eyes shifted away from mine, only made the sinking feeling in my stomach worse. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with dark possibilities. Was I being paranoid? Was I reading too much into things that didn't mean anything? Or was there something real beneath it all? Something my gut had picked up on long before my mind had caught up? I didn't know what scared me more, the thought that I might be imagining all of this, or the possibility that I wasn't. Half of you are asking me to dig deeper, and the other half are saying it may not be as big of a deal, but it's better to confirm than regret later. I think you're right. It's better to clear it out now than wallow later. Update 2. I spent the next few weeks trying to piece together my life, but the more I searched for answers, the more I felt like I was suffocating in my own home. The unsettling feeling that had been building up inside me ever since Thanksgiving had now evolved into something darker, something that left me with an ache in my chest that no amount of rational thinking could ease. I tried to confront my husband again, but each time I did, he dismissed me. He'd brush it off as if I were being unreasonable, as if my suspicions were some kind of fantasy I'd cooked up in my head. "You're overthinking it," he'd say, or "You need to trust me more." Every time he said those words, I felt further away from him, as if the man I thought I knew had become a stranger in his own skin. But there was something about those financial transactions that stuck with me. The numbers seemed off. Over the last few months, I'd noticed large, unexplained transfers from my husband's account to my sister's. It was subtle at first, small amounts here and there. But as I kept checking, the sums got higher. And when I asked him about it, he explained that Olivia had been struggling with her finances and he was just helping her out. But it didn't sit right with me. I knew my sister's situation. It wasn't dire enough to warrant that kind of money, and the amounts just didn't make sense. I couldn't just sit idly by anymore. I had to know the truth, even if it meant confronting something I wasn't prepared to hear. So I hired a private investigator. It was an impulsive decision, one that made my stomach twist, but I needed answers and I couldn't rely on my husband to give them to me. The investigator started digging, tracking down every transaction and every lead. I installed software that the private investigator had sent me on my husband's mobile and laptop. A few weeks later, I received a report that shook me to my core. The investigator had confirmed what I had been dreading. The affair had been going on for years. My husband and Olivia had been carrying on a secret relationship, one that had been hidden in plain sight. The child she had with my husband wasn't just a one-night stand. It was his. I sat there staring at the evidence in front of me as the world I thought I knew collapsed into pieces. There were pictures of them together, snippets of messages between them, and the paternity test results. It was easy to get that done. All I needed were a few strands of hair. My hands trembled as I looked at the report, the cold, hard facts confirming everything I had feared. It was hard to breathe, hard to think. The pain was overwhelming, a crushing wave that left me feeling as if I were drowning in betrayal. My heart was breaking. All I could do was sit there, staring at the damning evidence, unable to comprehend how the two people I trusted the most could hurt me in such a profound way. I thought about all the moments I had overlooked, the small signs, the lingering touches, the way my sister would laugh just a little too hard at my husband's jokes. I had seen it, but I hadn't wanted to see it. And now, here it was, staring me in the face. A truth I couldn't escape. It wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't just about the lies. It was the child. My nephew, who I had grown to love, was now a living, breathing reminder of the betrayal. I couldn't even look at the photos of that kid without my stomach turning. I had been playing the part of the loving aunt, while the whole time my husband had been playing the part of a father to this child. I needed to talk to someone, to process all of this before I completely lost my grip on reality. So I called my best friend, someone who knew my family almost as well as I did. We'd been through everything together, and she had always been my sounding board. When I told her what had happened, she didn't say anything at first. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line as if she were trying to find the right words. I knew something was off, she finally said, her voice soft. But I never thought it would be this. I asked her what she meant, and she told me that there had been gossip for years, rumors about my husband and Olivia. People had talked about it in hushed tones, but no one had ever dared to confirm it. They all thought it was too absurd to be true. They always had this closeness, she said, her voice laced with disbelief. But no one ever wanted to believe it. It was too much to handle. I felt myself shatter once again. There had been rumors that everyone had ignored, but I hadn't known. I had been blind, living in a false sense of security while the two people I trusted the most destroyed everything I had built. I hung up the phone, feeling numb, my head spinning with the weight of it all. The betrayal wasn't just about what had happened. It was about everything that had led up to it. My marriage, my sister, my family, everything had been built on lies, and now it was all crumbling before me. I couldn't stay in this house any longer. The walls felt like they were closing in, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I needed space. I hated them. And most of all, I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. I wasn't going to be a dumb Bambi and let this slide. I will make sure they pay. Update 3. You all were right. I should confront them. I wanted to know how they could be so sick, so dirty. The day had finally come. I had all the proof I needed, the photos, the financial records, and the paternity test results. I'd arranged a meeting at my house, a neutral ground. My hands were shaking as I set the table, as if preparing for a dinner party instead of a battle for the very foundation of my life. My sister and my husband were on their way, and I could feel the weight of their arrival pressing down on me. He picked her up on the way from his office, of course. When the doorbell rang, I almost didn't want to answer, but I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and opened the door. Both of them stood there wearing that familiar mask of normalcy. My sister with her wide, bright smile, my husband with his usual nonchalant look. But there was a tension in the air. It was noticeable, a discomfort that neither of them could hide, no matter how hard they tried. They knew. I motioned for them to sit, and they did so, warily, exchanging uneasy glances. I took a seat across from them, a heavy silence filling the space between us. I looked at them, a calm fury burning beneath my surface, and told them that I knew everything. I didn't need to say more. The photos, the bank statements, the messages, the paternity test results, I had it all in front of them. I pushed a pile of evidence across the table, each document landing in front of them like a bomb. Their faces went white. My husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting towards my sister, who looked like she might faint. There was no escaping it now. They had to face what they had done. They hadn't expected me to know, let alone confront them so directly. I stood up slowly, pacing around the room as I spoke, and I could feel the weight of my words pressing down on them. I started with the photos. The moments I had thought were insignificant at the time, the ones I had brushed off in the past. Each photo seemed to accuse them both, the closeness, the shared glances that now seemed so much more than they ever were. I didn't need to explain the intimate photos. The evidence spoke for itself. When I laid out the paternity test results, the room seemed to shrink. They couldn't even look at me now. I didn't wait for them to respond. I couldn't wait for their excuses, their lies, their defenses. The damage had already been done. I told them that this was what they had been hiding and that there was no more pretending. They were both silent for a moment, their guilt written all over their faces, but neither of them spoke. Finally, my husband broke the silence. His voice came out strained, almost a whisper. He told me that it hadn't been planned, that it was just a mistake, a stupid mistake that he couldn't undo. He said he never meant for it to go this far, that he had tried to stop it but had been weak. I couldn't stop the anger that surged through me. He dared to tell me it wasn't planned, that it was just some mistake. I shook my head in disbelief. I told him to stop, that I didn't want to hear his excuses. He didn't try to stop anything. He let it go on for years. He lied, and now, with all of it laid bare before him, he was still trying to downplay it. My sister was next. She had been silent, her head hanging, tears rolling down her cheeks. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, but her face was a mask of shame. She told me she was sorry, that she never meant for it to hurt me. She claimed that she got confused, that it was a bad moment, and that she didn't know what she was doing. I let out a bitter laugh, unable to hold it in. Confused, I said, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. You've been carrying on an affair with my husband for years, and now you're telling me it was just a bad moment? That's your excuse? What are you, a teenager? Even they know better. She had no answer, only more tears. She kept saying she didn't mean for it to happen, that she never wanted to hurt me. Her apologies didn't matter. The truth was in front of us all, and nothing could take it back. The frustration in me boiled over, and I couldn't look at her anymore without seeing the betrayal in her eyes. I told her she destroyed everything, my trust, my family, my marriage, and for what? Some fleeting moment of weakness that continued for years while she slept around at clubs and with my husband? Was she that desperate? Could nothing satisfy her? I told her it wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice to hurt me, a choice to ruin my life. I was furious. I told her that even escorts were more respectable than her. Her sobs grew louder, but they didn't touch me, not anymore. The woman who was supposed to be my sister had betrayed me in the worst possible way. She had broken something I couldn't fix. I turned my gaze to my husband, who was now visibly crumbling under the weight of what he had done. His face was pale, his eyes full of regret, but that didn't matter anymore. He didn't get to feel sorry for himself. He had done this to us, to our family, and no apology could change that. He told me he didn't know what to say, that he couldn't undo what he had done, but he'd do anything to make it right. How wrong was he? There was nothing he could do. The trust was gone, and no amount of apologies could fix that. I told him to stop, that I didn't want him to try and fix it because it was already too late. There were no more chances, no more excuses. He had crossed the line, and now it was time to face the consequences. I wouldn't let them manipulate me again. With that, I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving them both behind. I didn't look back. There was no point. I had nothing left to say to them. They had already taken everything from me. Update 4. The days after the confrontation were quiet, unsettlingly so. The hurt and betrayal lingered in the pit of my stomach, gnawing away at my resolve. I thought about the years of love, trust, and sacrifice I had poured into a marriage that had been nothing but a lie. I thought about my sister, my own flesh and blood, who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I didn't want to be the victim anymore. I was done with the sadness, the humiliation, the rage that was like lava. It was time to take control, to make them pay. I didn't just want to get even. I wanted to make sure they would never forget what they had done to me. I wasn't going to let this slip under the radar. My husband and sister were going to be exposed for the heartless people they were. I didn't care what happened to them anymore. In fact, I looked forward to the fallout. I began by targeting their professional lives. I had connections in the community, people who could spread the word quickly. The images of my husband and sister, close, intimate, and far beyond what could be considered innocent, were perfect for my purpose. I spread them anonymously on social media and tagged everybody, making sure they reached their workplaces, their friends, their family, and anyone who might have a vested interest in their lives. The response was immediate. My husband's company fired him within days. The moment the photos circulated, his career was over. His colleagues, many of whom had been complicit in keeping quiet about his affair, suddenly turned on him. He had tried to keep it all hidden, but now the truth was out. As for my sister, her boutique was no longer a safe haven for her. The shame of the affair and her own role in destroying my marriage was too much for her clients to ignore. Her high-profile customers, the ones who had spent thousands on her services, quickly distanced themselves. Rumors spread like wildfire and her business crumbled. There was no one left to support her. The woman who had once treated her like a confidant now avoided her like the plague. My sister tried to play the victim, but no one was buying it anymore. The stories of their ruin reached me through my relatives. The revenge didn't stop there. My other nephew, my cousin's son, the one who had always been close to me, took matters into his own hands. When he saw how destroyed I was, he went to school and told anyone who would listen that Nathan was an affair child, that his mother betrayed her sister and was sleeping with her husband all these years. He told them everything, even going so far as to say that the affair child knew who his real father was all along, yet came over to my house and had no shame, acting all innocent. The gossip turned into laughter and then mockery. The poor boy became the target of every cruel joke. Kids at school teased him relentlessly, asking him if he had always known the truth or if his father had ever told him. The teasing didn't stop. It spread across the school. His life became unbearable. He wasn't just a child of an affair anymore. He was the living, breathing reminder of my sister and husband's betrayal. I felt guilty at first that it had gone this far. The child didn't deserve the cruelty he was now facing. But when I came to know that he had known about his father, about the affair and about the lies. He had kept the secret. So in my eyes, he became just as complicit as my husband and sister. I could no longer sympathize with him. He had played a part in my suffering. And now he had to face the consequences of his traitorous parents' choices. The sympathy I might have once had for him evaporated, replaced with a cold, unyielding bitterness. Divorce proceedings were brutal. My lawyer knew exactly how to leverage the years of deceit. The affair wasn't just a betrayal, it was the cornerstone of my case. A second paternity test confirmed that the child was my husband's, and that gave me all the ammunition I needed. I was entitled to everything, the house, the money, the joint accounts. My husband walked away with nothing but his shame and the wreckage of his own choices. I wasn't done, though. Not by a long shot. My father, the man who had always been a stoic figure in our family, finally lost his temper. When my sister came crawling back, begging for forgiveness, he slapped her across the face right in front of the affair child. The sound of it echoed in the room, and for the first time I saw the man who had always been calm and collected lose control. He called her the worst mistake of his life. His voice trembled with rage, and it was clear to everyone in the room that he had nothing but disgust for her. My mother didn't say a word. She just stood there, understanding that for my father to act this way, the betrayal ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Their attempt to reconcile and to make things right was nothing more than a last-ditch effort to salvage their reputations. No one cared about their apologies. No one wanted to hear them beg for forgiveness. My family supported me. Even my mother said that I was her daughter before Nathan was her grandchild. Everyone knew that Nathan had known too. There was no going back. My husband and sister were isolated, left with nothing but the wreckage of their own actions. I watched it all unfold with a sense of grim satisfaction. There was no remorse, no second guessing. I had waited too long for this. In the end, I didn't need their apologies. I just needed them to understand the depth of the pain they had caused me. I didn't need closure. The satisfaction of knowing that their lives would never be the same was enough, that the mess they had created would never be undone, and to see their misery made me content. Sometimes justice doesn't come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from watching those who wronged you get exactly what they deserve. And I had made sure they did. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.